Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Pediatric Trauma, New Paradigm of Care 2014. We have a great show for you today. We have many countries from around the world participating. We want to thank everyone for joining us, whichever time of the day it is. This is a special event, and as always, the Pediatric Trauma series, which is by far the most popular of the ones we do, is always brought to you by the Childress Institute for Pediatric Trauma, and we'll hear more about that in a second. So we want to thank them for continually putting on these events and helping to teach pediatric trauma around the world. I want to thank our visiting course directors, Dr. Marty Eichelberger, who's professor of surgery and pediatrics and former chief of emergency trauma and burn services at Children's National Medical Center in Washington, D.C. Thank you, Dr. Eich, for
You're welcome.
Continually putting these on. Dr. Wayne Meredith, who is Director of Division of Surgical Sciences at Wake Forest School of Medicine, is also the Executive Director of the Childress Institute for Pediatric Trauma. Dr. Meredith, thank you.
Glad to be here. It's going to be great.
And I want to, we also have one more person in the studio that we'll be introducing later, Dr. Isaac Ashkenazi, who's going to be part of our panel on disaster preparedness. So thank you for joining us from Israel, Dr. Ashkenazi. Just a couple housekeeping things, and then I'm going to turn the show over to Dr. Eichelberger and Dr. Meredith. As always, I can pretty much promise you with technology there will be glitches with the internet bandwidth, whatever it is, it'll happen. Usually, just by closing your browser and restarting it, everything gets fixed. If you have any problems, you can email or call us and we'll try to get you connected. There are a lot of hospitals that block video feeds. We always try to work around that, but if it doesn't, if your hospital is blocking, we do have alternative choices. And we can help with that if you give us a call. In general, going to the guest network of the hospital usually works. Otherwise, we can direct you through the Adobe feed, which is usually accepted at most hospitals. We want to thank the Brazilian Ministry of Defense for being a part of this today. We have over 70 Brazilian physicians watching this today, and especially those of the Brazilian Armed Forces and Ministry of Defense. And they've played a significant role in working with us to grow our worldwide collaboration in pediatric trauma. Specifically, I want to thank Commander Pedro Sá and Major Carla Clausi for organizing the broadcast down in Brazil. We have this translated live into Portuguese, and you just saw the video on how to watch that. So hopefully everyone, we have live translation, and anyone who wants to hear it in Portuguese can listen in. We want to ask everyone to go to the exhibit hall. You'll see that orange button. Click the exhibit hall to go visit the booths during the breaks that we have or after the event. We want you to actively participate in the polls on the right-hand side. Please click those and give your answers so we can see what the world is thinking. This is CME. So if you go to the link button at the top right corner, then you can get your CME, take the post-test and get your CME credits at the end of the event. There also, in that link button, will be bibliographies of all the presentations so you can get a summary of the key articles that have shaping the way we're practicing trauma in children. There's also a research link. Andrea Dowd, general surgery resident at Wake Forest, is doing research on pediatric trauma, and I'll let you talk more about that in a second. The archive for this will be available in 48 hours. You'll be able to go back to this site and go to the video library and watch any part of the show you want to watch, and you'll be able to have access to that forever. And just to let you know, we have about 1,200 people watching today from around the world, from 17 countries, 5 continents. And with that, I'm going to turn the show over to Dr. Eichelberger, and who helped spend tireless hours putting together what's going to be a spectacular event today. So thank you for doing it again.
You're welcome, and thank you very much for inviting us and having the opportunity to speak to everybody about injuries to children. Today, the goal is to provide you a perspective so that you have information that you can use just in time. So when you need this information, the children will benefit. I'd like to start off today with Dr. Wayne Meredith, who is the Chief of Surgery at Wake Forest University's hospital and the Executive Director of the Childress Institute for Pediatric Trauma. We're very fortunate to have his involvement in this and his leadership. Wayne, thank you so much for coming.
So glad to be here. I think this is going to be a terrific event. Dr. Eichelberger's put together a program that has a theme that ties together all day long, sort of starts on disaster and works through the injuries that you might see in disaster, and from that, as a platform, it spreads out to other injuries that you might see there and how they would apply to everyday life for everyone. I think this is going to be highly useful information. The speakers are world-class experts on all of these problems, and they have really tight, what you need to know presentations. That should be a theme you'll find all day long today. Just for a moment, let me tell you about the Childress Institute for Pediatric Trauma. It is a philanthropically funded organization. It's a national organization whose purpose is to improve the research, education, and public awareness of pediatric trauma as a disease and a cause around the world. And this is one of our important events that we sponsor and fund so that there can be this education around the world. I will reiterate something Todd mentioned a second ago. If you go into the exhibit hall, there's one of the studies, which is a study from one of the fellows whom the Childress Institute is funding. It's our research project, so part of our research mission is to fund research. And it is about developing an automatic crash notification system that will identify, based on car crash characteristics, predict whether or not an injury is present. And there's a survey you can take, and we need your insight and your opinion as to these injuries. Just go to that, look at those things, and start taking that poll. Do as many as you can and stop if you see too many. It looks daunting, but it's not.
And just to clarify, that is in the links button at the top right corner of the main page you're looking at. The links button is where you'll find that, that survey.
Go look at that.
Yeah.
Anyway. This is going to be a great day. Thank you, Dr. Eichelberger, for putting it together. Thank you all the speakers for putting together really great, tight, pertinent talks. And thank you, Dr. Ponsky, for having this great infrastructure. And this is, as you say, this is the modern way of education. This is how we're going to educate the world about these problems.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. I also want to thank Dr. Ponsky and his whole team for what just a fantastic system. This platform is outstanding. It is the future, and we're able to benefit and make sure kids and other individuals can have access to this kind of information. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're really proud of all your leadership on this. Today we're going to talk in general about disaster management. The second section is going to focus on burn care. These are injuries that result from disaster incidents, blasts, gunshot wounds, these type of things. And then we're going to talk about extremity injuries, so that they're talking about the worst injuries. We're not talking about simple injuries. These are kids with an injury severity score of greater than 20. And then we'll, after that portion of it, we'll focus in on some special areas of general surgery. Today, we'd like to start the whole discussion with one of the leaders in pediatric trauma and pediatric surgery, Dr. Tuggle. David Tuggle is the professor of surgery at the Dell Children's Hospital in Austin, Texas. David has been a leader in this area, and he's going to introduce the concept of multiple casualty incidents and talk about the general concept of trauma management. David, good morning. We know you're out in Texas, which is a couple hours behind us, so thank you for getting up early this morning.
Oh, my pleasure, and thank you for inviting me. I'll have to say that most of my discussion will involve mass casualty events in Oklahoma, where I was a pediatric surgeon for 28 years. This is my new hospital, the Dell Children's Hospital, and it has a fantastic trauma program, and I'm very fortunate to be working with a group of very capable healthcare providers. Our objectives today, just one, these are personal experience and observations that I have had over the 28 years, including 5 mass casualty events. And so some of these things are what I've experienced. Understand that when a mass casualty event occurs, chaos occurs. It will happen every time, no matter how much planning you put into it. You need to plan for technology issues and understand that social media is becoming much more prevalent. I can tell you that comparing Oklahoma City to Austin, Austin is very much at the forefront of social media. And then finally, one of the things that is often not covered is family reunification plans for mass casualty events. Now, typically what happens with a mass casualty event is that people are injured, and EMS and first responders arrive. They are familiar with the trauma system and where patients should go. And typically they'll take those severely injured patients to your level 1 trauma center or lower level centers. However, non-EMS providers, your family or friends, may take you to the closest hospital. And so therefore patients will arrive and they're outside of the system that has been arranged and is drilled so diligently over time. So that's just something to be aware of. Just a case presentation to illustrate some of
Lost him.
Lost the audio.
Mark? Yeah, we lost his audio.
the trauma center was unaware of this patient that was being extracted over time. When she arrived, she was hypotensive, hypothermic with a grade 4 spleen injury and 30% burns. She underwent a laparotomy with a splenectomy, and it was quite some time before we were able to find her family and notify them that that she was there and was under our care. In 2012, that's the date when most of the information is available now. So 2013 is not completely collated. But in 2012, there were 357 natural disasters, 188 technological disasters, and 8,441 incidents of terrorism. If you compare 2012 to the previous decade, from 2000 to 2010, every year there was an average of 107,000 deaths per year. You can extrapolate the number of injured that survived and needed to be cared for, and the high of that decade was 297,000 deaths in 2010, but in 2012 there weren't quite 2,000 deaths. So we've had a dramatic drop in the number of deaths, and that's probably because we've had fewer weather-related or technological events. But remember that 1/3 to 1/2 of disaster deaths are children worldwide. So let me take you to Oklahoma City on April the 19th, 1995 at 9:02 a.m. Oklahoma is a little rural state. It's not very big, but we had a domestic terrorism event that set off a bomb in front of a federal building. And this is an early scene from the parking lot across from the building. You can still see the smoke billowing. There was a truck bomb with ammonium nitrate fertilizer, about 4,800 pounds, using diesel fuel as an accelerant. In the top picture on the right, you can actually see from video film the Ryder truck that was parked in front 5 minutes before the bomb went off. I will note that the Ryder company has since changed the color of their trucks. The truck bomb went off, and it destroyed the building and buildings around it in the street. You can see the dust, and this dust here is a hazard to the rescue workers working there, just as it was for the World Trade Center on 9/11. This is a shot from the scene, the sixth floor, looking back across at the building. The tree in the middle of the picture is still alive. It's called the survivor tree. But you can see that even with homegrown explosives, that quite a big blast can occur and can create a lot of injury. The blast effects, there was a fireball that was 70 feet in diameter, and there were a lot of burn patients who were encountered along with the other physical damage, and there were lots of volunteers, as you can see in the upper left-hand corner. For this bombing, more than 700 people were injured, 168 were killed, 22 injured children were delivered to hospitals within the first hour after the bomb went off. And of note, the reason that there were so many children downtown, there were two daycare centers where the children were had already been deposited by their parents, one in the federal building itself, which was the target, and another at the YMCA across the street about 100 feet away. The EMS responded, and additional ambulances were staffed by recalled or off-duty personnel, mutual aid ambulances, and personnel from the surrounding communities responded within a few hours. Physicians and off-duty nurses were recalled, and electives were canceled in the OR, and ICUs were cleared. One volunteer died. Now, this is the point I was trying to make, is that in a lot of these instances, volunteers will come and try to help with the trained rescuers, so that they were untrained and unprotected volunteers. The volunteer who died was hit in the head with falling debris and had an epidural hematoma. The mobile phones were overloaded. Emergency administrative radio systems didn't work in 3 of the 15 hospitals. And volunteer personnel who responded to the scene did not respond to the hospital, and they should have responded to their hospitals. Observing this, most died of building collapse, and this is true of most building collapse events, is that most patients die of building collapse. Most of the survivors were out in less than 30 minutes. The less injured will more likely get to the emergency department first, so that the more injured were responded later, so a mistriage occurs, and chaos was the rule for this event. We actually had a bomb scare at OU Children's early in the afternoon, and non-essential personnel had to be evacuated. So this injected even more chaos into an already very chaotic event of the bombing. Of the 47 injured survivors of children, there were 7 admissions. The injuries were 2 open depressed skull fractures, 2 closed head injuries, 3 arm and 1 leg fracture, an arterial injury, a spleen injury, and a burn. 3 patients went to the operating room immediately, 2 with neurosurgery, and 1 to have an arterial injury repaired. In the non-survivors, the medical examiner was kind enough to give us some information. There were 90 skull fractures seen in the non-survivors. 78% of the patients had cerebral evisceration, also called skull capping. 37% had an abdominal thoracic injury. 31% had an amputation. Almost half had an arm fracture, and a quarter had a leg fracture. Now, I want to contrast this to the tornadoes that typically occur in Oklahoma, which give us a lot more opportunity to observe a mass casualty event. In the 1999 F5 tornado, that actually was one of the tornadoes that changed the way tornado damage is graded, 50% of the children who were transported to a hospital were transported by private vehicle. This, again, creates a mistriage and adds chaos to the event. 24% of the survivors had head injuries, which is similar to the survivors in the bombing. Only 11% had abdomen or thoracic injuries, which is less than the bombing. 7% had lung injuries, 16% had extremity injuries, and 8% had natural gas inhalation. Now, one of the things that we have got better at in Oklahoma was cooperation and communication. This is crucial to practice regional cooperation. Now, we understand that competition between hospitals and medical systems and personality issues always arise within large communities, but these need to be put aside in the face of a mass casualty event. Another aspect is that the Red Cross itself, in their 2013 report, focused primarily on technology that was available and that was being utilized for triage of patients and to alert hospital systems that a mass casualty event has occurred. I think that one of the most striking aspects of this was the Boston Marathon bombing, which we'll probably hear more about shortly. Mobile phones may be unreliable. I tried to call a friend of mine in Boston who was taking care of children, and they had shut down the cell system because of the risk of a detonation from a cell phone, so that the cell phones were down for several hours there. And monitoring social media became much more obvious based upon that. So one of the things that I would encourage you to do is to practice your surge response, both with physicians, your mid-level providers, nurses, and technicians. You need to be aware of regional healthcare providers who have not participated in drills or planning, because they may not know the most efficient way to facilitate patient care in these events, and they may inject chaos into the system. Early reunification of the family is really crucial. The American Academy of Pediatrics has stressed this recently, and it is all local. Providers from outside the region are not going to understand how reunification plans work in these situations, and so it's really local and it needs to be practiced. I would encourage you to use your pediatricians and family practitioners as facilitators for family reunification, in addition to local law enforcement, schools, and daycare centers. The state level may be helpful, but again, they're going to be delayed by several hours. And understand that in domestic U.S. region, state laws apply for facilitating patient care. You need to practice family reunification in regional drills, enlist non-medical hospital workers to facilitate family reunification, such as social workers and the clergy. So the three concepts I would want to leave with you are to consider adding chaos or chaotic events to your disaster drills. Monitor and use social media as an early warning system, as mobile phones may become unreliable when a mass casualty event occurs, and plan for and practice family reunification. Thank you.
Dr. Tuggle, thank you very much, Dr. Tuggle. That was excellent. I hope you're going to stand by to be on the panel, which will happen in about 20 minutes. Thank you so much. I'm going to have Dr. Meredith introduce Dr. Jacobs.